Before we get into this video, I want to ask you a question. Can you imagine a world without phones? What about one without the internet? It's hard to fathom, isn't it? Well, these things weren't always around. They were invented and developed over time. And there were people who made significant contributions to making them what they are today. One such person was a mathematician named Alan Turing. He was part of a group of code breakers who worked tirelessly to crack codes during World War II. They succeeded against all odds, helping to shorten the war and save countless lives. But the real kicker is they did all this before the advent of modern computers. So how did they do it? Let's find out in today's episode of Before and After. How Islamic Golden Age hospitals flipped the world. The year is 1938 and German military leaders are feeling pretty confident. They've developed a new encryption machine called Enigma. It uses a complex series of rotors to encrypt messages, making them almost impossible to decipher. In fact, Enigma would go on to be used by other countries too, like the Japanese and the Italians. Now, when the French fell, the British managed to acquire some Enigma machines and the race was on to crack the code. A code-breaking unit was set up at Bletchley Park in Buckinghamshire, England. And if you think this place looks ordinary, you're right. That was kind of the point. It had to be inconspicuous. At first, the Germans changed the code every day. So to decode the messages, the recipients needed to know the daily code, which changed everything. By 1939, however, the British were able to figure out a way to read the daily key. This meant that for the next 4 years, Britain had a distinct advantage over Germany. It still wasn't easy though. To really make sure no one ever decoded the messages, the Germans made the Enigma machine as complex as possible. Enter Alan Matheson Turing, born in London in 1912. As a kid, he had a keen interest in puzzles and riddles. It was probably this that led him to enroll in the University of Cambridge, where he studied mathematics. He graduated in 1934 and joined the mathematics department at Cambridge. 3 years later, at the outbreak of World War II, he was recruited by the British government to help break the Enigma code. At first, Turing was skeptical. He thought the Enigma code was unbreakable, but he eventually came around. He figured if anyone could do it, he could. Now, don't get me wrong, Turing and his team were smart, but the Enigma machine was really something else. It could come up with billions of possible combinations per day. It could produce a different encryption every single day, and it could even change the code in the middle of a message. On top of that, the Germans changed the settings 3 times a day, so it was virtually impossible for anyone to keep track of the encryption. Basically, if you wanted to send a message, you could be sure that it was safe from spies. Or so you'd think. Turing's team was up against time. The Germans were at war with Poland, and the British knew that something big was coming. They had to crack the Enigma code quickly. They considered various ways to go about it, including hiring Polish mathematicians who had already made some progress on the code. Eventually, though, they decided to go all in and build their own machines to do the heavy lifting. And now I want to tell you about the amazing golden age of Islam. Now back to the story. So Turing and his team set about building their own Enigma cracking machine. They wanted something that could test thousands of possibilities at lightning speed. After much tinkering, they finally built the bomb machine. It was one of the earliest computers ever created. This machine didn't need human intervention. Once it was set in motion, it could carry out calculations at incredible speeds. But wait a minute, remember how the Germans changed the encryption 3 times a day? Well, the bombs could only work with 1 setting per run, so they had to be programmed to try 1 setting at a time. The team started by trying to break the encryption between Germany and its captured Polish territories. After a few months, they were able to do it. They had actually cracked the Enigma code. We should mention here that this was before the Germans started changing the code in the middle of messages, so the task was far from over. But this success gave Turing and his team hope. They kept at it, making improvements to the bomb machine and refining their techniques. In 1941, The Germans invaded Russia, giving the British a ton of intelligence to work with. These were messages sent by German forces on the Eastern Front. The British started getting more and more victories, turning the tide of war in the Allies' favor. For the next 3 years, Turing and his team continued to improve the bomb machine. They were able to decode more and more German messages until the war finally ended in 1945. It is important to note here that the average citizen had no idea any of this was going on. If they did, they might have questioned why they never heard about the people who were instrumental in winning the war. That's because everyone involved was sworn to secrecy. They weren't allowed to talk about their work for 30 years after the war ended. Today, we know that Turing and his team may have shortened the war by 2 years. This means hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of lives were saved. And that's not even counting the lives that were saved after the war. You see, Turing's method of breaking the code was revolutionary. It was the basis for many of the encryption techniques used today. After the war, he went back to Cambridge. But unfortunately, his time at Cambridge was cut short. After the war, Turing shared a lot of his knowledge with the United States and Canada. In 1952, though, he was charged with gross indecency for being in a relationship with another man. This was a crime in Britain at the time. Instead of fighting the charges, Turing chose to take an experimental drug that would make him infertile. He died 7 years later at the age of 54. So what would the world be like without Alan Turing? It's hard to say for sure, but it's safe to say that it wouldn't be the same. Maybe we wouldn't have phones or the internet, at least not when we do. Because of Turing's work, we can communicate with anyone in the world at the touch of a button. We can access almost all the information stored on the planet through search engines like Google. So thanks, Alan. If you enjoyed this episode, we've got plenty more just like it. Hit the subscribe button to stay updated. We also have a social media channel where we share fun facts related to the topics we cover in our videos, so follow us there too. But for now, it's time to wrap things up. Until next time, keep thinking outside the box. Thanks for watching.